Good morning, church. Great to see you, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. Thank you to Ty and to Kim for introducing me. My name's Steve, and I, if you hadn't heard already, am not from these parts. I'm from a small town just outside of London in England, and I have been living in Honduras for the past 8 years. My wife, Lindsay, who will be along very soon, has been living in Honduras for the past 12 years. And our shiny new daughter, Elizabeth, she's about this big, and you'll also see her later. She's been living in Honduras for about 7 months, and that's her entire life. I want to begin by saying thank you very much to First Church, because you as a church have been walking with us since the beginning of Proyecto Alas, for the past 8 years. And so in many ways, Proyecto Alas is an extension of First Church. And so we want to say thank you for your continued prayers, continued support and encouragement of the ministry that we're doing in Honduras. These are some of our kids that you can see on the screen. And they are very sweet and very cute, and they can also be an absolute nightmare. You won't be surprised to hear. There's Lindsay and Elizabeth, and we work with WGM, World Gospel Mission, and Church Mission Society and Street Kids Direct. I won't bore you with the details, but if you want to know them, come and speak to me later. This is Honduras. If you don't know where it is in the world, so you've got the US, then you've got Mexico, then Guatemala, and then, can you guess? Honduras, well done. And if you look at that green bit in the middle, we're going to zoom in to Tegucigalpa. Can you say Tegucigalpa? Tegucigalpa. Yeah, well, one person can. Thank you, Kerry. That is the capital city of Honduras, and that's where Lindsay and I live. And then you can see just up and then right, there's a small town called Talanga. That's where the project is. So Lindsay and I live in the capital city because that's where the universities are, and we have some students who are at university, and we walk alongside them in daily life. And then Talanga is where the project is. We work with children and youth at risk of going onto the streets and into gangs. They usually start going out onto the streets from the age of 7. Why? Well, because in most cases, they don't feel safe at home. You can imagine what their home situations might be like. Another reason is that they'll be sent out to work. One of our young people, his name is Orlin, he's now thankfully studying and in the equivalent of 10th grade, and he's 16. But from the age of 8, his full-time job was being a welder. That's because his family were not able to support him, and so he was required to support himself. When we say the children that we work with have a high connection to the streets, what that means is they spend most of their time on the streets for the reasons that I've already explained. And, again, as you might imagine, if they're out on the streets unsupervised, they can quite often get involved with the wrong kinds of people. Now, if you see a child on the street at 7 o'clock in the morning, that's fairly normal because school starts at 7 o'clock in the morning in Honduras. So we don't really worry about that. But if you're in the Central Park and it's 10 o'clock at night and you find a 12-year-old there, that obviously is not right. When we start working with our children, none of them are in education. And one of the main things that we do is help them get back into education in a way that works for them. We currently work with 65 children and youth and 10 young adults, that's 18 plus, and that represents 34 families. I realize it's not all about numbers, but it's helpful to get an idea, I think, of the scale. The center of what we do, we call mentoring. A mentor is an adult who's caring and consistent in the life of a child or a young person. You could also call it discipleship. Walking alongside them, helping them to make positive life decisions. Of course, the main positive life decision would be to follow Jesus. But there are other ones like getting back into school? Like, how do I get on better with my family? How do I get out of these bad habits or addictions? And as you can hopefully see on the screen, there are some real statistics that after 1 year of mentoring, it has a huge impact. 52% less likely to skip school after 1 year of mentoring. It's amazing. This is our building. Again, it's not about buildings ministry, is it? But it was also helpful as a tool. And I thought it might be helpful for you to see the space where we are. And it is very shiny thanks to the team that you have sent down last year. So thank you very much for the paint job. Downstairs we have Proyecto Alas. That's where we have the education and homework help sessions in the afternoons. Upstairs we have a coffee shop, which is currently closed, but we are looking to get that reopened very soon. Please pray for that process. And then you'll see on the left there's some garage doors. And that's where our barber shop is. We have an amazing team, our staff team. So from the left we have Sergio. He is actually a missionary from Guatemala. He grew up on the streets. When I first met him about 12 years ago, he was laid on the ground on the street in Guatemala City, so high on drugs that he couldn't even sit up. Now, God has done an amazing work in him, and he's now serving as a missionary in another country. He helps with the maintenance, he helps with the young people, with the children. He does a little bit of everything. And then we have Fernanda next to him. She's our psychologist. She works with children, young people, and their families in the area of emotional health, helping them to work through the things that they're going through, and equipping them with tools to help them become more resilient in the future. Psychologists also help diagnose learning difficulties or learning differences, be that ADHD or anything else that dyslexia might be another example of that. And that really helps then work with, that information helps our staff work with them and their school teachers work with them in a better and more effective way. Then we have Abby. She is our new education coordinator. She's been around for about a year, and she focuses on the children, what we call the elementary age children. But also she works with many teenagers who have dropped out of school at a younger age and are now back in school. So 14, 15-year-olds who are in 4th or 5th grade. And she's a professionally qualified teacher and very good at helping them catch up to where they might be typical to their age. There's Lindsay and I. Lindsay does the administration. She's the one that makes things work. So I always do what she says. And then we have Lorena. She's one of the founders of Proyecto Alas. She's second to the right. And Lorena is in many ways the heart of the project. Her focus is working with the mums. Now, we would like to work with the dads, but sadly, in almost every single case, there either isn't a dad or there is an irresponsible dad. And so she's able to run sessions along with Fernanda as well, with the mums, to help them learn how to be a better mum. And then finally we have Christian. He's our youth leader and local fundraiser. He has the patience of a saint most of the time with our young people. When we started out working with them, they were 8, 9, 10 years old, and they were very cute and mostly well-behaved. Now they're spotty teenagers, and they're falling in love with each other, and it's quite a headache for him to work with. But he does an amazing job. So that's our team, and we're really proud of them and really blessed to have such an amazing team that does the hard work, is the way I put it. Now, I won't go into all of the detail of this, but if you look at the blue squares, at the bottom it starts off with Street Connected. And that's the first phase that we work with children and young people. I've already explained pretty much what Street Connected means. And then we hope that they'll move into mentoring and education. And that will be until they're around 18 years old. And then we hope they move into transition to adult life. And then we hope they move into a stable life. And we've got examples of children and young people who are at each stage in that development. And then we have this aspiration to abundant life. I'm sure you've heard that phrase before, which actually we never quite get to. And so that's a final stage that we're there. Obviously, we can attain that through Jesus, and that's a theological point that I won't go into right now. This is Owen. I met him about 12 or 13 years ago when he looked like this. This is a picture from that many years ago. When he was a child, he lived in Tegucigalpa. And his dad left before the age of 1. And his mum got a new partner. And the way Owen tells the story is, he says, my mum was happy with her new family and didn't want me anymore. So he went out onto the streets of Tegucigalpa and got involved in a whole load of things, which I won't mention right now. But that led to him being taken away from his family and placed in a children's home. And he grew up in this children's home, and overall I think it was a good children's home to be in. And that's where I met him as a teenager. And I got to know him, and one day he said, Steve, I would really love to be a barber one day. I'd love to learn to cut hair. So we managed to get him some of these clipper things, and he was very excited, and he got started practicing on me. And so I had a bad haircut for a couple of years until he learned. And now, as you can see, it's much better, right? Yeah? Okay. Now, that children's home had a rule that when you turn 18, you're now considered an adult, and you have to leave the home and start your adult life. And as you might imagine, with a young man who had been cooped up, very well protected for many years, was let loose. And he did, I think the phrase might be, enjoyed everything. He managed to get a job as a barber in a local barber shop, but he got involved with the wrong kinds of people. He ended up owing money to the wrong kinds of people, ended up having addictions to certain things. Throughout all of that time, I was able to go and get my hair cut where he was working with him. Now, it was good because it was cheap and he knew what he was doing with my hair. But the main reason was to stay connected with him, to do some sort of mentoring with him, the best that you can in a public place like a barber shop. And so I would turn up and say, how are things, every month or so, and I would get a bit of an update. And then about 3 years ago, he called me and he said, Steve, I've been kicked out of where I live and I've been kicked out of my job. I've got nothing. He'd even contacted his mum and he was told he was not welcome to go back there. He said, what can I do? Now, thankfully, we had a space in our project building for him to stay. So I said, go and stay there and we'll work something out. And about a week later, I was chatting with him and he said, well, Steve, remember you've got that garage downstairs? Maybe we could put in a barber shop. And I thought, oh, why didn't I think of that? That's a great idea. And I shared the idea with Lorena. And she said, Steve, it's kind of a nice idea, but we don't want people like Owen associated with us. He had at that time quite a reputation for violence in the town. He had that time a reputation of generally not being a very nice person. And she said, we don't want him around our kids, which is quite a reasonable thing to say. And then a week or so later, we were having a prayer time at our home, and Owen had come to stay with us for a week. And Lindsay and I were elsewhere, and a friend of ours offered to pray for Owen. And at that time, he had an experience with the Holy Spirit. In that moment, he was healed from an addiction to cocaine. And there was a marked change in him. Before, if you gave some bad news to him, he would be very angry and would not talk to you for several days. And then after, there was an improvement. He didn't sort of get rid of his anger straight away. That was something that he had to work through. But we've seen an amazing change in him from that time. So this is an up-to-date photo of Owen, and you can see the barber shop as we were just getting it started. It still didn't have a floor at that point. And we got it open, and it is what you might call rustic at that point. And he did loads and loads of haircuts, and over 3 years was able to save up some money from the sales. At the same time, he started studying at university. And so he's now studying social work. And you ask him, why are you studying social work? And he says, well, I received so much as a child that I want to be able to give back, pass on the blessings that I received. Now, thanks to the team that First Church sent this year, we were able to do a bit of a revamp of the barbershop, amongst several other things. Owen had to do a 3-month work experience, and so we decided we'll close the barbershop down and make the most of everything and do a whole refurb of everything. And it was really amazing. So it's no longer a barbershop, and it's now a studio, which is very fancy. And so it all came from him, this idea. And so this is what it looks like now. And the barbershop is a really amazing metaphor for Owen's own personal development. Before, he was also a little bit rustic, shall we say. Now he's much more professional and ready and doing really well. That's a picture of him with Elizabeth when she was just 3 days old. Remember, he came over and he sat down and he held her like this and he just went, oh goodness, I want one of these. And I said, oh, and there's an order to these things. And then he said, Elizabeth, we're going to take you to a convent and you're going to become a nun so that no one will ever kiss you. He's the most amazing young man and doing so well. And thanks to the investment, thanks to the prayers from First Church over the past 8 years, this transformation has been possible. How much more time do I have? I'm lost.
Till you're done.
Oh, okay. Well, he said till I'm done, so I'll be here until tomorrow. Is that okay? Jose Daniel is another one of the young people that we have worked with over the past 8 years. This is, again, a picture from about 8 years ago. He has, in many ways, a similar start to his life as Owen. He grew up in Talanga and spent a lot of time on the streets out begging or selling certain things just to get by. He, from an early age, had to provide for himself. When I met him, or when we met him as a project, we were able to get him back into education. And he did pretty well, until a certain year came around. You can probably guess what I'm about to say, 2020, and a certain thing called COVID. And we had a lockdown in Honduras. We were only allowed out once every 2 weeks, and that lasted for 8 months. And we had to completely shut down the project. And then in November 2020, when we were able to reopen, we wondered which of our kids are going to come back. Thankfully, most of them did come back. We were working with 50 children at that point. 48 of them did not pass the school year in 2020, despite lots of interventions. But one of the children that didn't come back was Jose Daniel. And we were worried. Weeks and weeks and weeks went by. We didn't hear anything of him. Until one day, I was on a family visit. And my second worst fear was confirmed. I saw Jose Daniel on a street corner, dressed in a gang uniform, and he was clearly selling drugs. I was able to chat with him, and find out how he's doing, and thankfully he remembered me. He was quite high at that point. And I said, Jose Daniel, if you ever want to get back into school, back into study, just let me know. Now that's a euphemism for if you want to get out of the gang, we can make something happen. And then I went on family visits 3 weeks in a row to different places in Talanga, and every single time, who happened to be on that random street corner I was visiting? Jose Daniel. So I thought the third time, right, I'm going to write down my phone number, I'm going to hand it over to him. And I said, Jose Daniel, if you want to get back into studying, you can call me. And several weeks went by and I didn't hear anything. Lindsay and I were due to travel to the US on the 1st of November that year. And so, of course, on the 31st of October, at 11 o'clock at night, who gives me a call? Hi, Steve, this is Jose Daniel. They've given me permission to leave. And so I was actually packing my suitcases at the time. I was able to arrange with some of the other young adults to go to Talanga. We found an appropriate place which was dark where we wouldn't be seen, where he could jump in the car, and we took him away. Thankfully, we were able to find him a place to be for the next few months, to get off the drugs that he was on. And then he transitioned into our Transition to Adulthood program. And he's been doing really well. He's now in the equivalent of the penultimate year of high school. And he has dreams to be a nurse one day, and I think actually he would do a really good job at that. This is what he looks like now. Studying, or at least pretending to study in that photo. And then him with Elizabeth. I didn't realize when I first handed her over to him that he knew what he was doing. A few years ago, he was charged with a 3-week-old baby and had to bring up this baby for several months. Now, I'd love to finish here and say he's doing really well and thank the Lord for all the progress that we've seen. But a few weeks ago, I heard word from Honduras, from the team, saying, Steve, someone's broken into our storeroom. The team who've been there will have heard this story. And someone's taken a whole load of our stuff. And the only person that had access to the building at that time was Jose Daniel. And then separate to that, I heard that Jose Daniel had fallen back into his previous addictions. And so although we're not certain of what happened, we can put puzzle pieces together. And I share this to demonstrate that everything is not always fine and dandy and hunky-dory. There are real challenges. And it is a walk that we are taking with these children and young people. And I ask for your prayers, particularly for Jose Daniel and for the other children and young people that he represents who are still on that journey. I also ask that you pray for Lindsay and I as we're learning to keep a baby alive, working out what to do with this thing. She's very cute and you'll see her very soon. TCK means third culture kid. There are some unique challenges to raising a child in a different culture than the one you grew up in. And so we ask that you pray particularly for wisdom for Lindsay and I in how to do that. Please pray for Abby and for our staff team who you've now been introduced to. They are amazing, but they do the hard work every single day. So pray for good rest, good opportunities to rest, and for refreshment in the Lord. And pray for our kids. We work with both boys and girls. I shared stories about young men today, but please pray also for our girls and young women. We've opened up extra spaces for girls over the past few years because we've seen they just don't have the same opportunities as the boys. So please pray for them. And pray for the coffee shop, for the barber shop, in the processes that they are in. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for your continued prayers and support. And thank you very much for having me today.